Hello, guys. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. Jason Marlow, what's up?
Howdy. How you doing, Quinn?
Hey, I'm great. So, guys, my name is Quentin Torbert. I'm with the Hillsborough County Young Democrats. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. And we're joined here with Jason Marlow. He wrote a really amazing article about quarantine and some of the things that we can learn on the city and the county level of what we learned. First off, how are you surviving quarantine? How are you surviving the pandemic?
I mean, listen, I certainly recognize my privilege. I'm far luckier than most. I mean, if anything, surprisingly, I've been able to actually acquire more work than I had prior to it, which is bizarre. And I know I'm not in most people's situations, but I mean, me and my family are okay. You know, I'm really, really fortunate in that regard. I hope the same is true for you.
Sure,
and I hope the same is true for everybody out there. I mean, I don't want to wave the mission accomplished banner and act like it's over yet, because I don't think it is. But I'm happy that me and the people that are around me have gotten through it this far.
That's it. Everybody's practicing social distancing and washing hands, so we should be good to go.
Hopefully so. Yeah, hopefully so.
That's good. So what made you decide to write the article? Since we're in the middle of this, what makes you?
A combination of insomnia and just ideas blocked up in the back of my subconscious, I guess. I mean, I wanted to do something that would sort of just put into words what is happening in this moment. Sort of take a snapshot, I guess, of where we were in this time period. And I think here in Hillsborough County, we're sort of in this really interesting. I mean, obviously, so many places around the country have this interesting amalgam of stuff going around with the national and federal races and state and county. But I think Hillsborough County, because we're a bellwether for the nation and because we have a lot going on locally, I think there's just a lot to look at. We talk about, I think, we'll get into this. I think Mayor Castor's ascension into the national ranks as an attention getter and an important political name.
Yeah, I'm excited about
that. The excitement and controversy going behind Les Miller right now and his exit from the political stage and the race to replace him and succeed him in County Commission District 3. There's just a lot of political intrigue right now, I think, on a county and local level, and just sort of felt like putting it all down into words.
Yes, I love it. So for our viewers at home, I got an email from Jason, and the subject of the email at the very beginning was like, I could not go to sleep, so I wrote this article. I hope it's good. And then it turned out to be perfect. So sometimes I write some of my biggest things, or I have my best thoughts late at night when I can't sleep. So I
agree.
Where you're coming from. So that's pretty awesome.
Which is a pain in the ass, because you have that eureka moment. You're trying to go to bed.
Exactly. It's like, I'm
not very helpful,
but let me grab my pencil and paper. Let's put it down. Yeah, that's cool. So let's start with the first one. So let's talk about the Emergency Policy Group. What are your thoughts on them and how they've kind of been conducting themselves with
So the thing about the EPG that I found kind of frustrating was twofold. One, I find it kind of bizarre. For those of you who don't know, it's an 8-member body, 5 currently Republicans, 3 Democrats, Les Miller, Kim Overman, Jane Castor, the vice mayor of Temple Terrace, because Mayor Mel Gerardo, the fake doctor, has resigned, Rick Lott, the mayor of Plant City, Sheriff Chronister, Mike Merrill, who's the outgoing county administrator, he cannot vote, but he's a member of the board. 5 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and yet we had a board that, I mean, frankly, just couldn't seem to get things done, was acting. Also, Melissa Snively, I forget, from the school board, is also a member on that. She's also another Republican. Just couldn't get things done. The meetings were fraught with technical difficulties. We saw that things were cutting around partisan lines in a way where you would sort of hope they weren't. The thing that really particularly caught my attention twofold. One, the curfew vote. The curfew vote ended up passing before it ended up being rescinded. It was criticized by folks on the left and the right, but frankly, I mean, it was done in direct relation to the fact that people were violating the curfew, and I guess Hillsborough County was seeking some form of countywide enforcement in a way to, I guess, layer on top of what Governor DeSantis had already put into place and what Mayor Castor may have put in locally here in the city of Tampa. But more concerningly, frankly, was the vote about wearing masks. And that fell down by a 7-2 margin. And what concerned me the most about that is, listen, let's be frank. The science in this is indisputable. Wearing a mask, it's not a guarantee, but it does potentially help the spread of this virus.
Sure.
I think that's a really small ask to ask of a consumer or a person going into a public place where, especially in a place where social distancing can't be observed, especially in a place like, let's say, a supermarket or a bank, where you might not have, a lot of separation from other customers or, the person who might be, handling your money or, exchanging words with.
Yeah, we're really close to them. I get it.
Yeah, for that to fall along partisan lines concerns me because, like, ultimately these are local officials. They're supposed to be held accountable by the people in their own communities. We shouldn't be really dealing with or arbitrating things along national political ideologies. This shouldn't be a Republican or a Democrat thing. Ultimately, we all got to look at our neighbors here in Hillsborough County and say, I either did my job to protect you or not.
Exactly.
And I think
kind of the way is really, really sad, especially during times like this. We've seen so many areas all over the country where people come together. So it's really sad on the local level where it still seems like a political issue. It should be like a life or death or a health or sickness type issue.
I agree. I just really don't think wearing masks is a controversial ask. I don't think I'm inhibiting your freedoms by asking you to be mindful and courteous to everyone else around you. I mean, frankly, it's like the way you would ask somebody to not drive drunk. You're posing a risk not just to, to other people. Be considerate and simply don't do it. So the fact that failed along partisan lines and the fact that the EPG is, again, bizarrely 77,000 more registered Democrats in the county, but we have a 5-3 EPG. And then we had things consistently falling out 7-2 or in awkward ways because, as we'll get into later, Les Miller, that Democrat attached to his name, you could make that a lowercase d, and we'll talk about that later. But the EPG, I really thought that was one of the things I really wanted to highlight. Was we have a lot of issues, I think, here on a county level to help fix our EPG. Though big shout out to County Commissioner Kim Overman, who's a dear friend, and Mayor Castro. I think
they were like leaders. And then you also mentioned that they had like a lot of technical issues, which is pretty much just a bit distraction. Like you're trying to focus on something, and then we have these technical problems. It kind of gives the appearance of being not all
unprofessional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it gives an aura of unprofessionalism to the whole atmosphere. But hopefully we learn from this. We recognize the limitations of our own technology, and we make improvements.
Exactly.
Heaven forbid the next time we have to meet in this way virtually, we make some improvements. But that was sort of where I was at with the EPG and my thoughts on that one.
Cool.
That was, I think, really the highlight of the last couple weeks and months of quarantine was the battles on the emergency policy group.
Gotcha. It was kind of like a soap opera almost. It was kind of entertaining. Sad.
So it had a telenovela-esque type storyline to it.
Yeah, that's cool. So what about the second one? What's the second lesson that?
So secondly, I really think one of the big stories here is, well, frankly, there are two stories. One, the county local officials here in Hillsborough County, they pulled their gun on the virus before Ron DeSantis did. Ron DeSantis, I mean, obviously he's the governor. He's got a lot of problems. He's got a lot of stuff to worry about. But let's give credit to why the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis is out there taking a victory lap right now about how we've defeated COVID and flattened the curve here on a state level. Let's give credit where that credit is due. The places of great populace in the state of Florida, the metropolitan areas, they shut down before DeSantis called them to. Miami, Orlando, Tampa. These cities had the wisdom and foresight to say, we got to shut this down before this spirals out of control. While DeSantis was sitting on his hands and, putting masks on wrong and wearing one glove and shooing the Surgeon General away like the Sandman at the Apollo Theater. Like, he was doing all that while local and county officials were taking the lead. And among them, again, I want to give a big shout out to Kim Overman and Mayor Castor. County Commissioner Overman and Mayor Castor really took a lead on this. And on a local level, I think Mayor Castor has sort of, she got numerous pieces on national media about being a blue mayor.
Everywhere. I love seeing her all over the news. I loved it.
And I think her national profile is really, really skyrocketing. I don't know if she has, larger political ambitions or not, but her political profile on a statewide and national level is clearly rising. And I think this crisis has particularly promoted her, especially with Mayor Kreisman on the way out, to being the most important singular political figure in the Tampa Bay region. I mean, which is crazy to say about somebody who had never been a politician before and then got elected just a little over a year ago. But as it stands right now, I defy anybody to tell me someone in the Tampa Bay area who is more powerful politically than Tampa Mayor Jane Castor.
I'm really
She's a rising national star.
I love watching her too, because I'll be completely honest. I like her now, but my likeness for her is growing. She wasn't my favorite at the very beginning when she announced her candidacy, just with her some of the things that happened when she was a police chief. But now,
I worked for a different candidate.
Yeah, well, sorry.
I mean, like I wholeheartedly hear you, but I also agree with your sentiment. Mayor Castor has really
she's like risen to the ranks. Like, you really find out a true leader, a true politician during like times of crisis. So we've never been through a pandemic like this on our large scale like this, and so she's risen above this. I love like her interactions with the crowd. I was actually in Ybor last week, just walking through, and she was there with kind of some of her police cohorts, and she's going around just greeting people and kind of calming people's fears down. And that's like huge. We're a time when there's like fear and panic. It's something simple as like interacting with someone's dog, or just being out in the public so people can see that she's a woman of the people. And I love that aspect about her.
I bet she brought Alcadessa, her dog, with her. Dessa's pretty damn
The dog actually was not with her. No.
What? Dessa wasn't with her? I've met that dog. That dog kissed me on the face the first time we met.
Really?
It means I'm a good person.
The dog is famous. It's all over Instagram. She's famous.
The dog, Dessa could be mayor. I mean,
what's the dog's name?
Alcadessa. It's Spanish for mayor.
Oh, okay. I know.
It's not a great name, but let's brush past that.
I kind of like it though. Yeah.
It's too much. Too many syllables.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really do think the pieces, one of the pieces of this that mattered is that Jane Castor has risen from this to a position of national prominence, and to the credit of the local and county officials that acted early. They acted earlier than Ron DeSantis did, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. Frankly, more credit for flattening the curve than the governor does.
Sure, it could have been way worse. I mean, you look at the national news, like it could have been way worse. So
absolutely,
we had those things in place.
Yeah. All right. So point number 3.
Número tres. I'm learning Spanish now that I'm quarantined. So número tres. And this is something that we really didn't know. Testing in Hillsborough County remains essentially inadequate. It was not as bad as it was in other places all over the nation, but it's still pretty inadequate. Can you speak to that one a little bit and why that's
I mean, I thought it was kind of remarkable and embarrassing, frankly, that we had a testing site established at Raymond James Stadium right down the way. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was within 2 or 3 hours, they had to shut down testing. And I know antibody tests are starting to become more available, which is great for helping people to identify if they've already had the virus and therefore might be immune to, acquiring it again. But the only way we're going to get to a place where the economy can be really, truly safely reopened is if we're in a position where you have mass testing. Reports that I've seen cited by PBS NewsHour, public health experts think we need to be doing 3 to 5 million tests a day. We're doing 250,000. I mean, that is deeply, deeply, deeply concerning. We should be concerned about that, not just on a county and local, but a national level. Here in Hillsborough County, while the curve might have been potentially flattened, I still have a lot of concern for the fact that we are an area, as is predominantly the whole rest of the state of Florida, that has a lot of assisted living facilities, which have basically proven to be, frankly, like incubators of this virus.
Yeah, that's really sad.
It absolutely is. And, these are the most vulnerable populations among us, and these folks in particular happen to live in the state of Florida, many of them here in the Tampa Bay region. And I'm very skeptical that we're going to see the curve reduced, especially when the governor isn't really being thorough and forthright with the numbers. There's been a lot of reporting that there's been a lot of fudging of the numbers on a state level to try to reduce, the numbers in order to help push forward with the reopening of the economy, perhaps too suddenly.
Yeah.
And I just very concerned about the availability of testing and how that intertwines with the status of our local and county-wide and region-wide public health apparatus.
That brings up a really good question. And I actually don't know this. As far as the testing, does that come from the federal level, or is that done on a state-by-state basis?
So to my understanding, some of the tests have been provided by the federal government, but by and large, they're being purchased on a state and even on some instances on a county and local level. The problem is because of shortages both for tests and PPE, there have been, and this has been well documented by governors across the nation of both parties, there have been literal bidding wars between governors of one state and the other and their purchasing programs and the attempt to acquire PPE. There have been instances of the federal government seizing PPE from other states in order to repurpose that towards, federal reserves. There's just been, and I think this is point 4, a just complete and total lack of preparedness from the federal government on down.
Perfect segue, number 4.
Yeah, and let me use that as my segue. I am not saying, and I don't want anybody to be of the opinion that I'm saying we should have been fully prepared for this. We should have expected this. We knew this was coming. This is like a plot out of 12 Monkeys. I'm expecting Bruce Willis to, come around the corner any minute. This is not something I would necessarily say we should have expected. That being said, it is the federal government's job to be prepared in every instance. And we were so woefully unprepared in every regard for this. And I mean everything. I mean in terms of the logistics, the financing, the messaging. Every single element of the federal government's response has left the average American wanting. And I think if anything comes out of this crisis, I really do hope that it impresses upon people the importance of having strong governmental institutions run by professionals with ethics. The stuff with hydrochloroquine and, the Trump administration pressuring doctors to push this drug that is an anti-malarial and doesn't necessarily work for COVID-19. The fact that the PPE have been impossible to get, that testing, has not gotten to the point, as we just discussed, to where it needs to be. While I don't expect state, county, and local officials to necessarily be as prepared, the federal government, and this rests with the Trump administration, really dropped the ball on this. And I mean, I'm not even trying to be, overwrought or metaphorical. Blood is on their hands. People are dead today that might be alive had the Trump administration acted more forthright and with, a little bit more diligence on this pandemic. I mean, in January, Trump was saying it's a nothing. We'll get down to 0 cases. Then, it was, let's reopen the economy. Then it was, inject yourself with bleach. It has just been one continuous. Yeah, it's been a continuous series of embarrassments. I'm troubled by any American who's not been thoroughly embarrassed by the absurd spectacle we've all been living through over the last.
I think it won't be that big a deal because of the stimulus checks. I think the Republicans are using that as an opportunity, as a speaking point of why he should be reelected. And then there's groups of conservatives that are going, you know what? The economy was really good, and he's giving us money now, so we're still going to vote for him. So as far as his base, I don't see that going down.
I'm so skeptical. $1,200 isn't going to last. And I'll give you a great example, man. The median rent in the state of Florida is $1,128. That's the median rent in the state of Florida, $1,128. You really think a $1,200 check is going to keep a family let's say even just a couple, going for a month, maybe 2? For 14.7% unemployment announced today, tens of millions of Americans out of work. If you think $2,400 is going to keep a nation where 40% of the country doesn't have $400 in reserves afloat, I think conservatives are in for a very rude awakening. Probably. And I'll say anecdotally, I find it very funny that Mitch McConnell, a walking turtle, decided to discuss the notion of bankruptcy for blue states when, in fact, the blue states subsidize a state like Kentucky. Kentucky is a succubus of federal dollars, whereas a state like New York is actually inputting tax dollars into the national reserves. The notion that we're talking about, allowing states and localities to file bankruptcy instead of funding them is absolutely terrifying. I mean, the kind of layoffs a city like Tampa would have to make if we have to eat all of this loss of tax revenue out of our budget, it's incomprehensible. We just had an election a year ago about the consequences of the 2008 recession on our city in terms of the provision of social services. Imagine where we might be 6 months, a year from now, after what people are saying is the worst economy since the Great Depression.
That's troubling.
And I am very skeptical that $1,200 checks are going to satiate a lot of even Trump's base. I really am. I'm exceptionally skeptical. Yeah. I think Republicans, despite all their hypocritical and hypothetical love of austerity, they only care about austerity when it's for projects they don't like. they're going to have to dig back in their pockets and find some more money for millions and millions of Americans, for local, state, county governments, and small business owners nationwide. Because
especially the small business owners, I think they've been hit probably one of the worst. Just even driving through Tampa, seeing all these small mom and pops close. Hopefully they'll open. Hopefully they'll reopen after all this pandemic ends. But it's some of these restaurants aren't looking too.
No, I think you're going to see a mass rash of restaurants and lots of small businesses, frankly, that are going to shutter their doors permanently, and it's excruciating. But I mean, frankly, there's no way to avoid this. Not to get all too convoluted, but all this, let's get back to work, let's open things back up crowd. I just think a poll came out today. 64% of Americans, according to an ABC poll, do not want us to open early. You can't get 64% of Americans to agree that water is wet, but they agree that we shouldn't open the economy too early if that means the cost is loss of life. And yet we have Republicans out there saying that the disease can't be worse than the cure. That's like your house being engulfed in flames and saying you can go back inside, the fire is peaked.
Yeah, it's so inappropriate and so backwards. And I can see this is very, very tricky because I can see where they're coming from. Essentially, we're in the middle of a economic collapse right now. So I get what you're saying. But it's like crappy on both sides, essentially. If you open up the economy too soon, we're going to start interacting with each other too soon, and then we're all going to get sick, and then you have even more deaths. And so you have that.
Yeah,
if you don't,
absolutely.
You have more small businesses go out of business. It's a chain reaction. It turns into another economic world crisis on the international stage. So it's almost a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, well, speaking of lose-lose, let's segue to number 5, which is a lose-lose for everybody, which is the failure of All for Transportation to survive its April 15th county commission vote. Listen, Confederate General Stacy White really won a big one on this one. I mean, he really got away with undermining the will of 60% of the voters of this county. And Les Miller helped him for one reason or another, and we'll get into that, drive a stake potentially into the heart of All for Transportation.
And for people who may just be looking at this video for the first time, can you give us like a quick rundown of all that?
Certainly. Forgive me. So briefly, just to give a Spark Notes version effectively, Stacy White, who is a Hillsborough County Commissioner, has challenged the right of Hillsborough County to implement All for Transportation, a tax that was implemented in the 2018 election. It was a tax designed to help improve regional and local transit across Hillsborough County using an assessment of tax dollars to sales tax. And what effectively happened is Stacy White sued. It's going before the Florida State Supreme Court right now. There are genuine concerns that it will fail and be killed by the Florida Supreme Court. In an effort to get this through, what effectively was attempted was the county commission tried to hold a vote to uphold AFT effectively as a vote by the board as opposed to the election that we had in 2018. Mm-hmm. And instead of it passing 4-3, as it should in a board with 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans, Les Miller, who was retiring, who is considered by many, including many of my friends who are elected officials and connected in the East Tampa community, considered by many the quote, and I'm going to air quote here, the godfather of East Tampa.
He is the guy. He really is the godfather of East Tampa.
Well, I mean, the godfather, you could say he made AFT an offer they couldn't refuse. And he basically said that because of calls he had received from local citizens in his district, upset about the possibility of having to continue to pay a tax, which, frankly, they were already paying and had been paying for an entire calendar year. But that these people who were on the margins could not afford to continue to pay this tax, again, that they were already paying. And so he voted against it. And, I mean, there was wanton speculation that he had been bribed. I had heard that certain local officials and influencers had not, I don't want to say gotten to him, but influenced him. Noticeably some folks in the East Tampa community who were not supportive of AFT when it passed in 2018. From my understanding, they led the charge against it to Commissioner Miller, and it failed. And I mean, listen, the reality is that if the Supreme Court does vote down AFT now, All for Transportation is probably effectively dead.
Wow.
I don't think anyone really knows what the consequences of that might mean, but they will certainly be far-reaching and have a ripple effect that we can't even frankly fathom. And I'll say that the people of County Commission District 3, which is the most impoverished county commission district in our county, will suffer disproportionately should all for transportation fail. Those are the folks who most desperately need access to high quality public transportation to reduce their living costs, car insurance, the need to, have an automobile maintenance, in order to get, access to higher quality jobs, perhaps downtown from East Tampa, or, even perhaps to St. Petersburg. That opportunity will not exist if AFT fails. And so for one reason or another, which only Les Miller will be able to answer to, he saw fit to undo, frankly, one of the best things that's happened to our county in years.
Did he release any comments of why he dissented? Or was it just the reason?
As I said, his dissent was basically because he felt, and this was something that he says was voiced to him by constituents and influencers in his community, that he could not ask the people of East Tampa to continue to pay a tax, again, that they were already paying, but that he could not ask them to continue to pay this tax in light of the economic meltdown that people were, that we're all experiencing. And I appreciate that, but the reality, again, is this. That money was already being taken, had been taken for a year, was going into pockets where that money could then be spent. And that money was going to save people's lives. It was going to improve sidewalks so that children could walk safely to and from school. Also help reduce the fact that we are one of the epicenters of pedestrian fatalities in the nation.
Wow.
It was going to improve bicycle routes to help reduce the fact that we are one of the epicenters of bicyclist fatalities in the nation. It was going to potentially improve interregional transportation, going along the I-4 corridor out to Orlando, going out into Pinellas over to St. Pete. It is an enormous loss for not just Tampa and Hillsborough County, but the entire Tampa Bay region if all for transportation fails. And if it does, frankly, Les Miller will bear, despite the fact that he was one of its biggest advocates in 2018, because of this vote, Les Miller will bear some significant responsibility, not more so than Stacey White, but some significant responsibility should it fail. And that sort of segues us into point 6, which is all about Les Miller and about multiple facets of his, a position on the Board of County Commission. First I want to say the kind of abhorrent racist rhetoric that he receives because of his support for the curfew is just something that we as a state and a locality and a county, we can't accept. We can't accept it. And we need to make sure that we're pushing those kind of darkest voices into the margins of our society where they're, left to rot. That being said, I really do believe that the godfather of East Tampa has significantly diminished his political legacy with this AFT vote. And I'm also very curious to see how he plays in the County Commission District 3 race, which is, I think now, the single most interesting race in Hillsborough County. And that's with all due respect to my very dear friend, State Representative Adam Hattersley in Florida's 15th Congressional District. But I think Board of County Commission District 3 is the only race in Hillsborough County that you could not get even the most seasoned political prognosticators to predict.
I think he's made it very clear, at least at the beginning in 2019, that he doesn't want to get involved with this. So he says he's not going to endorse anyone. He's going to kind of sit on the sidelines. And
so he has said that. But
what have
with
you
the
heard?
recent entrance of Rick Fernandez into the County Commission District 3 race, it was reported, and Les Miller is on record as saying that he is going to reevaluate the possibility of endorsing and playing in that race. He chose to retire. He chose to not run for county clerk as he initially had filed for. And it's very, very interesting to see whether or not he chooses to play in this race. The race is currently 5 candidates. Rick Fernandez, as I mentioned, who just recently entered, is a from Tampa Heights longstanding transit advocate. You have progressive champion and nurse Sky White. You have long-term county employee Gwen Myers. You have former elected and local pastor Bishop Scott, Thomas Scott, and you have former city councilman and former city council chairman Frank Reddick. This is a very interesting 5-way race, and Les Miller choosing to play in it could have an enormous impact in a race where, when there are 5 candidates, the margins are going to be razor thin.
And
so
we've said in past videos, and obviously I haven't changed my perspective at all. Obviously, my candidate is Sky White. who, in the spirit of transparency, I will volunteer for her campaign. She's like the true progressive that I believe that can push that district forward. Les Miller, he's done a really good job of taking it this far, but we need somebody a little bit more radical, a little bit more oomph to kind of push it over.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. I think Les Miller hasn't done a good job. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, and I'll go on record in saying it.
That. Why not?
I said it. I listen. District 3, County Commission District 3 has festered for a long time, and that's certainly not all Les Miller's fault.
Correct. Yeah.
And those were, the result of long, sustained systemic racism and economic inequality. That said, on numerous occasions where Les Miller has had the capacity to champion, let's say, raised impact fees, which could have put money towards impoverished communities in our county, battling developers in a way that could have helped put more money in our county coffers, Les Miller has constantly looked the other way. And though he was an enormous advocate for AFT in the beginning, for which he deserves sincere credit, his flip-flop on offer transportation will, like I said, disproportionately negatively impact the very people he's claiming to be standing up for. And I think there will be a price to be paid, unfortunately, by the people of County Commission District 3 if offer transportation fails. However, like you said,
that bad taste is going to stay with people. Do you think this is kind of the stealing fate that people are going to remember him by, his legacy by?
I think it will be part of how he's remembered. My curiosity is how he plays, how his votes play, and how his record plays in the current race to replace him. Are candidates driven to Rick Fernandez or Sky White or Gwen Myers, who are more transit-oriented candidates? All three have sincere elements of their platform specifically revolving around transit. Rick is specifically a transit advocate. Is that going to have an impact in this race? I think one of the other things we're going to have to talk about, frankly, is race. We have a white and Latino entrant into a race that is historically been the only African-American district in the county. There is a lot of issue there. I mean, he is from this district. He has every right to run in it. Your skin color does not preclude you from running in a district if it just so happens to be elected by people of a different color. That being said, of course, it's incredibly important for us to have equity on our county commission as a county that's nearly 20% African-American and only has one African-American representative on our county commission.
Yeah.
So it is a race with a tremendous amount of intrigue and nuance. And I eagerly look forward to seeing how it will play out as a voter in County Commission District 3.
Yeah.
But those are all the 6 lessons that I took from this quarantine. I really look forward to seeing how all this plays out. I'm really thankful for all the people that have, helped make our society run during this period. All the folks who've been out there working at grocery stores, our healthcare workers, our first responders,
people on the front lines that keep our lives moving, keep our way of life as seamless as possible.
We owe those people more than just a thank you or a flyover with the Blue Angels. We owe those people the respect that means that we're willing to fight for better public policy on their behalf. Hazard pay, better healthcare access for all as a human right. I mean, these are just simple things that we should be fighting for, especially in the wake of what we've all been going through, improved unemployment benefits, an improved social safety net. And these are just things that, we need to be fighting for, not just because there's been a pandemic, but it should be opening our eyes to the glaring weaknesses in our system.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you for your time, Quentin, and I appreciate all our listeners out there. Thank you for your time. And this has just been one other installment. Hillsborough County.
I love interviewing you. We always have such a good time, so I love doing this. So, guys,
I'm sorry it's not in person and over a beer, but it's been great to spend time with you, buddy. I'm glad you're happy and safe.
For sure.
Yeah, we'll get that beer next time when we can all be in a room together again.
Very soon, the Corona thing will be something to pass. I'm excited to watch this video a year from now. We'll be like, remember that crazy time we were quarantined in our house for 6 weeks? We survived.
I sure hope this is all over then, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think we'll make it. Cool, man. Well, hey, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
You take care, buddy. Be well.
See you later. Bye.